life is about not making any excuses and just taking responsibility. Anything that stops you from taking responsibility is an excuse. And you might say, like, what do you mean with responsibility? Responsibility is defined by the synergy between your action and the consequences of your action. And by understanding the synergy, by understanding the patterns, you acquire knowledge, understanding what action leads to what reaction. And of course, you cannot always be completely calibrated, and sometimes you might take an action that gives you a reaction that you didn't think about, but then you adopt it and strengthen your knowledge to recognize the patterns even more. And that is basically what life is. You just get better and better at it. And first, life did it through DNA, through natural selection, but now we do it mainly through reason. And basically being responsible flows automatically when you take away all the excuses. You come into a state of flow where you just do what you gotta do. You don't really have problems because you know it's just an excuse. Self-pity is an excuse. Gossiping is an excuse. Pointing fingers towards other people is an excuse. Like judging people is an excuse. And what I wanted to talk about today is the worst excuse of them all. Because even if you say like, yeah, but I don't care, even I don't care is an excuse. Because there is no such a thing as, oh, I don't care, so that stops me from, have my actions having consequences. You cannot argue that your actions have consequences. Things just happen. Things are just the way they are. And funnily enough, it is something that is completely intertwined with your life. You're already taking responsibility, and you're already, like, on a fundamental level, fully aware between this action and consequence relationship, because it's completely ingrained in your life. Every day when you go, you sleep, you eat, you take a shit, you shower, all these things that you do are just because you understand the synergy between action and the consequences. If you don't take a shower, you start smelling. If you don't eat, you start, feeling hungry and at one point starve. If you don't sleep, you become, sleep deprived. You understand these things. So when it comes down to just accepting reality for what it is, I don't even have to convince you guys, which is something I talked about in the past, but now I realize you guys agree with me. When I say these things, all of you guys just agree with me. Even if you disagree, it's just an excuse. You know that I'm right. You know that this is omnipresent in your life. Your entire life is proof of it. Every single second, actually, is a proof of what I'm saying. Action reaction is omnipresent, and understanding the patterns between the two allows you to cope, to be able to improve and have an impact. So basically, taking away all the excuses brings down your life to just doing what makes you responsible. It's just seeing, okay, what consequences my actions have and how do I act accordingly, and that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Everything else is a fucking excuse, and you know it. So I'm not even going so much into that anymore. I'm not even going to try to explain. Like also clicking and all that stuff. Like, oh, I got to click, I got to do that. That's all an excuse. You know really well what you got to do. And everything you're actually taking and pulling out of the closet or out of your mind is just an excuse to justify being irresponsible. But you know it's an excuse. Get rid of it and it solves itself. But what I want to say, like, you just start falling into a flow, and it will not just benefit you, but it will also benefit the world. So yeah, I've given you quite a list of excuses that people love to have. Like, it's really funny. We literally live in this society of and in this culture of excuses. And like, the reason why we make so many excuses is because we literally arm ourselves with excuses to counter other people's excuses, to the point where we even have this hidden unspoken rule where you really say, like, I'm fine with your irresponsible excuse if you are okay with my irresponsible excuse. Of course, when you then go into the media, you can become like there can be a witch hunt. You can become the black sheep where everybody goes like, oh, pointing fingers at you while they're doing the same. But either way, like, just in society, in our social interactions, we even say it sometimes. Hey, I'll take care of my own business, you take care of your own business. I ain't pointing fingers at you, you ain't pointing fingers at me. I just do, like, I'm fine, my excuses are fine. Don't point out my excuses. But even that, when you think about it, right, pointing out other people's excuses in order if it's not productive and impactful, that's also an excuse, just so you know. So even pointing out other people's excuses is an excuse. It's always about impact. It's always about taking responsibility. And we live in this society where when people are in a situation where they, like try to blame someone or whatever, people always say like, yeah, but what about you? Or, hey, I ain't pointing fingers at you. You don't point fingers at me. And the funny thing is when you put that back even 150 years ago, same with slavery. Back in the days, people that had slaves are not going to go to someone else and like, hey, why do you have slaves? And even if you would say like, oh, slaves is irresponsible, people would say, like, what about your uncle? What about your far nephew? He has slaves. Don't come and tell me. And the thing is, we are in a very similar situation right now where, like excuses are made constantly and pointing fingers to stop us, to stop us taking responsibility. But at the end of the day, if you get rid of it, you just start acting. And it goes really quite far. Like all this, all these excuses, because excuses on a fundamental level, like you always have to only justify yourself towards yourself. And this entire excuse system, is just it's literally a bullshit system that has been indoctrinated and has been learned, right? Where you just completely embrace it while you're bullshitting yourself. Like, you guys know it. You guys know when I say this, like, yeah, you have responsibilities and you gotta take action. And everything else is an excuse. Same with procrastination. It's just an excuse. That's it. Get rid of that bullshit excuse. It's bullshit. Responsibility is not defined by other people. Responsibility is defined by reality. So it's not because everybody has a slave, it's fine to have a slave. And you know that shit. It's not because everybody in your environment eats meat that it's fine to eat meat. You know that shit. You know that it's wrong. You know that it's like, and then you say like, but I don't care about the animals. It's not about caring or not caring. It's about the consequences of your actions. And it's not about like, oh, I don't care about the consequences of my actions. Even that is bullshit. It just happens. It is what it is. And when you're confronted with that reality, when you have your own kid or when you have to take a shit, you're not going like, yeah, I don't care. I'll just shit my pants, or I don't care. I'll just let my kid die. It doesn't happen like that. And it's an excuse. You're just using it as an excuse to justify your responsibility. Whether you care or not does not change the reality. And the moment you get rid of all these bullshit excuses, you just start acting accordingly. You start acting responsibly. And this is basically the fundamental insight of what the difference is between someone, like what the difference is with someone that is bullshitting himself and lying to himself and being dishonest to himself, and someone that is actually, just looking at it and doing something about it. And funnily enough, the only difference is between the two is the extent. Well, it's just one is not making excuses, the other one is. It's taking responsibility, the other one isn't. And responsibility, I'm really sorry, man, that's what it is. Growing up, becoming mature, becoming an adult, becoming a man, that is taking responsibility. That's what it is. You don't stay a kid, You don't get to stay a kid where you can go like, oh yeah, this, that. No, you're not a kid anymore. You guys are adult. You guys are responsible for your actions. So, what I want to say, by the way, what is very important. So that's basically insight about about the extent to which you like people are making excuses, and I've given you a big list of excuses, from pointing fingers to judging other people to gossiping. Even most of the self-development is just an excuse. Self-pity is an excuse. Feeling like bad about yourself is an excuse. Procrastination is an excuse. Your life is filled with excuses. Filled with it. I don't know what to do is an excuse. Like, all that shit is just an excuse. But there is one excuse that rules them all. There is one excuse that is bigger than any other excuse. And it's the excuse that you settle with doing enough. That's the biggest one. You can never settle for doing enough, because you always can do better. It's not even about the question, can you do better? It's how you can do better. And if you truly understand that, if you stop bullshitting yourself, right? Completely. You're just brutally honest. You just stop having excuses. You just do and take responsibility for your actions. Very simple. You do that. No excuses. Even then, you can always do better. And this is the difference between a visionary and someone that just ends up achieving jack shit. That's how you define impact. So if you want to understand how how you have a huge impact, how these people like, but you guys even know that, by the way. You guys know that, like deep inside, there's a part of you that knows that you can do better. And the reason why you say you can't is just because you use that as an excuse. And the thing is, like, I'm just talking here. Let me be very clear here. I know that you know. Do you understand that? I know it. I see myself in you. We're the same. I know it. So you don't have to make excuses. You don't have to even pretend in the chat. I know it. And you know it as well. So being aware of these things really allows you to, drop all that bullshit, start taking responsibility, just grow up. Easy, done. Do what you gotta do. Have impact. Today, all the pieces of the puzzle will fall together. I talked about the past few days about excuses and how making excuses is really a fundamental mechanic in our lives, how it allows us to, go through life and basically, not take up responsibility. And I'm using all different words, but I'm going to make it very, I'm going to define them properly so you guys know what I'm talking about. Basically, life is merely the result of action and reaction, right? You do something, there's consequences of your action, and basically everything, even towards the fundamental building blocks of how you work, it's constantly, something happens, something reacts, and basically as we grow older, we try and figure out what the patterns are, that bring about a certain reaction based on an action. And that's actually the only thing that science does. Even empirical evidence, looking at, the world, trying to understand it, finding certain mathematical equations in order to predict which action will lead to reaction, really allows us to understand the fabric of life and the fabric of the universe itself. And as we grow older, as kids, I know I already explained this, but I'm explaining this because I'm going to go even deeper. As we grow older, basically what we do is we are merely trying to understand the patterns that bring about a certain a reaction. Like if you grow up and your parents, help you and give you some, like validate you and such, basically you are learning based on how your parents react and how your environment react, what works and what doesn't work, what the consequences are of your actions. But here is what I didn't talk about yet, and this is going to be mind-blowing. Basically, as we grow older, as kids, we have quite a strong understanding of reality, a better understanding than you guys might think. But if you do a certain action, right, and your environment acts differently than what you would think, this doesn't make any sense because reality seems to point this direction. Why is my environment saying the otherwise? Like, even though that is the case, you are still, subject to what other people, think about you, what other people decide about you. And as a result, your action reaction becomes a bit more, even though you understand there is a discrepancy between the people around you, whether it's your parents, family, teachers, whatever, you just see certain patterns. And since you recognize seemingly doing what is right ain't working, you just start adopting mechanics that do work. Because at the end of the day, what you care about on a fundamental level is what works. What you care about is the consequences of your actions. You don't care about, whether it's right or not. You just care about that it works. And if you grow up in a dysfunctional society where making excuses is really a fundamental component, what is it that happens? This is what happens. Basically, you merely trust the patterns that allow you to understand which action results in a reaction, which action has what consequences. That's what you trust. If you grow up and your parents are the ones, for example, that, are the ones that literally shape your environment, your setting, makes everything what works in your life, you automatically start trusting that pattern. It's literally like recognition, pattern recognition. And the thing is that while I'm talking about this, this is one of the most scientific understood concepts in psychology, and it has to do with basic conditioning. It's like the dog of Pavlov. If like for the people that don't know what the dog of Pavlov experiment is, it was Pavlov. Basically what he did is he had a dog, and whenever he gave him food, before he gave him food, he first rang a bell. And at the start, the dog didn't understand it, he just kept eating. But when he kept doing the experiment for a longer time, the dog was already getting excited. Even on a physical level, he was already like even biologically getting saliva and stuff by only hearing the bell ring. And what is so crazy is that we work the same way. We just see what action leads to which reaction, and if our environment and our parents and our schools and our teachers and the environment around us is rewarding us for excuses, it's rewarding us for having a certain taste or identity or whatever, what do? We just adopt it. Even though on a fundamental level we know that it doesn't match with reality, but because the consequences are overriding, because the consequences of your environment is what mostly defines your safety and your life, what happens is you're actually letting go this trust you have on reality, and you're adopting a trust in your environment. And what does that result into? It results into validation seeking. The reason why everybody is validation seeking, or almost everybody is validation seeking, is because as they grow older, what they learn is it's their environment, it's the intersubjectivity that is the one that is taking care of them. And as a result, what they do is, rather than ping to reality or to logic, they ping to other people. They ping about their own ID through other people. And basically, when it comes down to like, and this is where everything comes together. Not just is it about like about on a fundamental level just conditioning, just condition, basic Pavlov conditioning. You just learn, you grow, you see certain patterns, and basically you just adopt them, you implement them in your life because they work. You take yourself in another situation that doesn't work with these conditioning, you just change immediately. Because the only sole purpose of your conditioning is that it works, that the consequences from your actions have a certain relationship. And yeah, like you might wonder, okay, like this is quite interesting. Well, it's not just quite interesting, it basically just explains everything. The thing is, you guys understand this mechanic. You understand like how it works, although you have never put it into words. Now that you hear it, you go like, whoa, what the fuck? But like what I started realizing even more is like what people merely do is they do what they think works. And what works is not defined always by reality. Even though you could say even people around you, right, define what works. But if their beliefs is what actually starts defining your consequences, you will automatically start adopting them, even identifying with them if it works. If you can use your excuses, right, then to you it's almost like reality. It's almost like, yeah, why wouldn't I use an excuse if it works? But on a fundamental level, when you go deeper, you know that your actions have consequences, and you know there is a discrepancy. But because your environment has always been, giving you this feedback loop where you get rewarded for certain behavior that is not in line with reality, you just go with it. You go with the flow, and you start trusting it. You start trusting it even more than you trust reality. But then what happens is, as you grow older, you start creating an entire identity. And the reason why you create an identity, let me tell you why you create an identity. Identity is merely a way in which we conceptualize our individuality. We just create an image of our individuality to justify our excuses. And it works. Like, I mean, you go around, you can really get off the hook, get off your responsibility by just saying like, yeah, but that's not how I am. I don't agree. That's not my opinion. I don't feel like it. You have this entire cocktail that that you strengthen through individualism because it shields you off of your responsibility because it works. It works until the framework allows it. And what I mean with that, it only works for the extent that other people allow you it work, whenever it is subject to the intersubjectivity. So what happens here right now is following. As you grow older, right, you first have this approval seeking, you don't really understand, you try to do what's right when you're a kid, you get slapped in the face. People, if your parents are doing stuff or the teachers or whatever are doing things that are irresponsible, are completely, like don't make sense, you have to, in one way or another, try and find a coping mechanism in order to be able to make sense of the action and the consequences. So if reality tells you one thing, but the beliefs of other people show you another thing, you actually just let go of your trust in reality and you start trusting your intersubjectivity, which then results in validation seeking when you start growing older. But it gets worse because as you grow older, you start realizing, but wait a minute, it's all a scam. It's all empty. People don't give a shit about me. You understand that it's an excuse. You start seeing through the system. And that's when validation seeking starts translating into comfort. And that's why a lot of people, even watching right now, are in this transition phase. Like at a certain point, you still think what other people think about you because you think it's relevant, it matters. But you start realizing with day in, day out, you start realizing more and more, but wait, nobody gives a shit. And then it's just about like, who cares? You don't even care about what other people think about you. You just merely care about like the settling with what you already have. And that's the thing, like when you fundamentally understand this mechanic and that it's just all down to basic conditioning, and just basically Pavlovian mechanics, like literally the test of what Pavlov did with a dog. We are just exactly the same thing. We've just been conditioned to be like that. But where is the connection where everything falls apart? It's that on a fundamental level, reality does override everything. If you start trusting the intersubjectivity more than anything else, or you start trusting what you have and hold on to that, or your identity, you know these are all excuses and you know they don't work. But still, you trust them more because the consequences seems to give you better benefits than understanding reality and logic instead. But here's what the click is. The click is merely on a fundamental level you understand, and you guys know this, that logic is way more to be trusted because it allows you to give you a much better framework where you will be much more aligned and where the consequences of your actions will create a lot less dissonance and a lot less conflict. Because if you just follow the intersubjectivity or you follow all these other, patterns or whatever, what happens is the following. It is not accurate. And as a result, whenever you experience dissonance or conflict, what do? You start just like adopting denial. You start rejecting. You start literally rejecting reality because it works. But if on a fundamental level you start realizing that this entire system, this entire mechanism, not only do you know you're bullshitting yourself and it's just excuses, but it's screwing you over. And that is why when you then boil it back down to understanding, how do you change it? It's very easy. Just as you got conditioned to value intersubjectivity, you can condition yourself to value logic instead. And that is what the click is. Because on a fundamental level, what you do is you just do what works. And what you're doing is you're always pinging to what you value the most. What is it now? For some people it's comfort, for other people it's validation, for some people it's parents. Like some people really all the time, like they ping to their parents because they provide for their food, they provide for their home, so they got to decide if you go to school or whatever. But then suddenly you get adult, you get 18 years old, 19 years old, suddenly you are, by yourself. What happens? Identity crisis. Your identity, this entire framework that you've created, that you've molded, suddenly doesn't work anymore. And then you just break down and you start adopting a new framework. But the thing is though, the only reason why you have to adopt a framework and identity is because you are going against reality. You want to make excuses, because the moment you just look at logic and you just look at our understanding of reality, there is no discrepancy between action and the consequences, and it's something you can fully trust and fall back on a fundamental level, you can. And if you then have a situation where it doesn't work, it's not because it doesn't work, it's because of a lack of understanding or because of just bad RNG. And if you truly understand that that framework is so much more fulfilling, so much more like fundamental than any other one that you have right now. And the thing is, you guys know this. Everyone knows this. Everybody knows that reality is a framework they can fall back on more than anything. And that's what your inner child was trying to do. But if it gets punished as it grows older, it starts making excuses to cope with the discrepancy with reality. And as a result, it becomes like, you know, a conditioned excuses mechanism that just completely, you know, like rottens your mindset and your life. Makes it completely dysfunctional. And that is why, like not only is this, you know, what I'm explaining here just very simple, like even the scientific community, if they hear this, they would just say like, yeah, damn straight, this is just how it works. Because there is already evidence, there is already tests, there are already experiments. What we just try to do is we just do what works, what seems to work. But the thing is, like, there is nothing that works better than reality itself. And even if intersubjectivity is telling you otherwise, you know deep inside that it's flawed. Maybe when you're a kid, you don't know it. When you're a kid, you actually don't know. If you guys remember when you were a kid, even if I remember when I was a kid, when my father was angry at me, I didn't blame my father. I blamed myself. Because I couldn't project. I thought when I was doing something that was not even wrong, I was just playing with toys, he came, he started punching everything away, saying like, oh yeah, you shouldn't play toys and stuff. I really thought it was my fault. And that's something a lot of people can relate to. As a kid, you always think it's your fault. But as you grow older and you start creating more ability to project and create images, you start, you know, using the system and the mechanic as an excuse. Because you have built coping mechanisms to deal with the dysfunctional intersubjectivity that is not aligned with reality. And that is like something everybody is responsible for. Everybody's guilty of what I'm explaining right now, and you guys know it. You guys really know deep inside. And you know one of the sickest, you know, one of these coping, like, because everything, like all these excuses, like one that people love to use is like, yeah, but it's not my responsibility, it's his. It's not. And you know it. But the reason why you do that is because it works. If someone comes and tries to blame you, right? Goes like, why didn't you do that? It was not my responsibility, it was his. And then the other person, what does he do? He goes to the other person. So you just deflected the responsibility. But if you start basing yourself pure on logic and trust logic and reality itself, what you do is you just look at the situation and you go, how can I fix it? Rather than pointing fingers saying like, oh, I pay my taxes, the government should fix the problems in the world. No, you don't even do that. Because you know it's an excuse. It's an excuse to deflect the responsibility. You know, if you can do something about it, you just do it. But it's because you trust the intersubjectivity, because it worked, that you're following up on it. But it's the cause and the root of all your shit. It's the cause and the root of all suffering in the world as well. All human cause suffering. It's that mechanic. And that's why trusting logic on a fundamental level sets you free. Because rather than pinging to the intersubjectivity in order to understand, you know, like the patterns between your actions and the consequences, you just start pinging to reality itself. You start pinging to logic itself. And it channels like more and more. That's why I say step 4. Why is step 4 so important? Because you generate more and more trust, because you understand that logic has a much better pattern recognition, can give you a much better explanation between actions and the consequences than any other belief system or any other paradigm that you were adopting in order to, you know, go on with life. And that's the thing, like when you start understanding this, it's merely about, you know, trusting logic and understanding that it's better than intersubjectivity. And you got to do that on an emotional level. That's what, you know, why you can go to the yo-yo effect and stuff. The reason why it works, the reason why the click system works is because you can recondition yourself to start valuing logic, to start valuing reality. But if it then doesn't work because your environment or whatever, what happens? You fall back. The reason why you fall back is because you just go to the next thing that actually works. Even though on a fundamental level you know that it makes no sense. But whatever, you just do, what works, right? But it's exactly that system. It's exactly that behavior that is screwing you over and that is screwing over the world. And you know it. You fucking know it. You know that logic and reality and taking responsibility is the only option. But you've let it go because you thought it didn't work, but now you know better. So like this is really like on a fundamental level, like it's not just about, like the pattern recognition of logic and everything. It's also about like how conditioning works. And it's also like when you think about control, for example, right? Control is merely the extent to which your actions have influence over its consequences. Do you know that even if you say like, oh, I'll let the government decide for me, that's still the way you gain control. You gain control by giving it to the government, but still it is something you give. But the thing is like, it not only does it, go against your ability to make choices yourself because your environment intersubjectivity is doing it for you, but it's also screwing you over. And by building yourself and just by falling back and trusting logic and reality itself, you gain full control. You don't care about the intersubjectivity anymore. You don't care about what other people think anymore. And that's why when people click, they go through this freaking like catharsis, because they suddenly realize, what the fuck, I shouldn't ping to other people. I should ping to logic, to reason instead. And why do they lose it? The only reason why they lose it is because when they don't see the required consequences, right? Because of a lack of understanding, a lack of trust, they just let it go. But it makes no sense and they know it. And that's why understanding this information, understanding the excuses, understanding responsibility, understanding that there is no such a thing as you can't use your identity to justify the discrepancy between your actions and consequences. You cannot. You can't say like, I don't agree with facts. Yet people do it all the time. Your identity is almost shaped to denial, like as a source of denial. That can't come good. It fucks you over. It screws you over. And you know that. Pointing fingers saying other people have the responsibility, even in here, how many people, even in this building, what they do is they just give me control. They give me control because they think like, yeah, that's what works, right? No, like I'm merely a person that base myself on logic, that base myself on reality. And of course you can think like, oh, maybe, I don't have so much insight in these things and I'll just go and check out with a thing to get a better view. But at the end of the day, you always have to fall back on reality itself, on logic itself. Always. And if you do that, you can't even point fingers to others. You can't say like, oh, it's their responsibility or their responsibility. You can't do that because you know that you are responsible based on your understanding of reality and the extent to which you can actually have a change and an impact. That's all that matters. Anything else is an excuse. And that is why when logic and reality is the only thing that creates a framework, you don't have to justify yourself to anyone. You don't have to make excuses to anyone, but you only have to justify yourself, towards reality, towards logic, towards the consequences of your action. And that's it. So guys, stop making your shitty excuses. You guys get it. It's been conditioned. It's been fucking like literally like it's overcomable. You know how to do it. It's not just about taking responsibility. It's also about pinging towards reality and logic itself. Trust that. And you know why people come over here? Let me tell you why people come over here. Everybody that came over here is because they trust me. And you know why you trust me? Because I predict so much. Because I'm so successful. Because I've achieved so much. You go like, this guy must have something, else he wouldn't have all these consequences. He must insight. No, I don't have jack shit. The only thing I have is logic and reality. And that's something that you all can do. You can all ping to that. So all the trust you have in me, you don't even have to have it in me. The only reason why I can even predict stuff is not because I'm some fucking like psychic. I just use science, logic, reality, and that's right in front of you as well. And maybe you can say like, yeah, but for me it's really hard. Well, you can train it. Neuroplasticity. There is no excuse. Even the people that don't trust me, there is no excuse because you know it's true what I'm saying. And that's the thing. When you truly understand and know on a fundamental level, right, that you're making excuses because you understand reality, you understand this fundamental mechanic, don't fucking use all the bullshit into subjectivity, because it's screwing you over and it's screwing the world over, and you know it. Apply and start trusting logic on a fundamental level. Do the 4 steps. You can do it. It's trust logic. Realize that what you're trusting right now, which is the intersubjectivity or settling with what you have, is bullshit. It's causing you suffering. It's causing the world suffering. On a fundamental level, look at both. Project past, future. And you yourself will just hold on to logic instead. Because you want control. You want it. You want synergy between actions and consequences. You want it. It's because it never worked when you were a kid. You gave up. You gave hope on trusting what was right. What is what's right? It's following reality. It's seeing reality and just acting. If you see evil, you go like, why? But then people start going evil and all that shit. You just go like, but I'll just adopt that shit then. Because that seems to work. No, you know better now. You know fucking better. Don't make excuses. The world is a shithole. You guys can do something about it. Trust logic on a fundamental level. It will set you free. I've never explained the click more simple than this. Because that's what it is. It's about trusting the patterns that give you control and give you the ability to predict. It's what gives safety. It's what gives you, security. On a fundamental level. And you know it. You can relate to it. It's like, wait a minute. I'm telling you, your inner child on an emotion, your subconsciousness will grab logic when it understands this. It will eat it up. Because that's what it wants. It works better. And you know it. Look at me. I make more money. I'm more successful. I have more impact. I have everything better. I have a better life than you. It's that simple. You can't deny it. I have a much better life than you. And it's not because I'm better than you. It's not because of identity. It's not because of fame. It's because of me valuing logic. You get better results. And you know that as well. Reflect on this. See it. And fall back on reality logic itself. Fuck intersubjectivity. Intersubjectivity is screwing you over. It's bullshit. It's telling you a lie. And you know it. This is the way to set yourself free, man. Trust logic. It's really going to, like on a fundamental level, trust it. Trust reality. And even if you're in an environment, like come over here, work here. Create a feedback loop. Put yourself in an environment where, you don't have as much obstacles. I'm giving people the opportunity to do that shit. You can make a difference. You can live a meaningful, purposeful life. Rather than all the time, this empty bullshit excuses. You know it doesn't work. It's that simple. Don't point fingers. Don't make excuses. Don't settle with what you have. Don't procrastinate. Don't make distractions. Fucking start acting. You guys want it. On a fundamental level, you guys know it now. Don't make excuses, man. Don't let this shitty conditioning screw you over. You can recondition yourself. It starts fucking now. Is having an impact saving lives. Having an impact is being as responsible as you can be based on your knowledge. That's what it is. And depending on the situation you are, it changes. It might be, like it might be getting into science, might be, starting a company, depending on your setting, of course. But in this situation, most of you guys, if not all of you guys, the best thing you can do is spread this awareness. But if you wouldn't know, then, being responsible, but now you guys know better. And that's what it is. Responsibility has to do with knowledge. And now you guys know what you guys can do to spread. You can change the world. If everybody stops making excuses, we live in an utopia. If everybody takes responsibility, we live in an utopia. No excuses, man. So yeah, I would say like for you guys, the best thing you guys can do is almost for everyone is to come over here and be committed and don't make bullshit excuses and always wonder, how can you do better? How can you do better? Because settling with what you're doing is the biggest excuse. And I'm telling you, it's more liberating than ever. And it never stops, by the way. It's not like I did enough today, I can take a break. That's settling. No, 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 no. You never take a break. You rest because it's responsible to rest.